Welcome. Welcome to the Women's Leadership Forum Network 96 reception. With us today to honor First Lady Hillary Rodham Clinton are the Distinguished Chair of the Democratic National Committee, Dawn Fowler, National Chair of Women's Leadership Foundation, Carol Pensky, the Massachusetts Chair of the Women's Leadership, Shannon O'Brien, Chairperson of the State Democratic Party, Joan Menard, and our honorary chairwomen of today's eminently successful event, First Lady of Boston, Angela Menino, and Teresa Heinz and Vicky Kennedy, our dynamic veteran campaign spouses of the two outstanding Massachusetts senators, Ted Kennedy and John Kerry. I'd like to take just a minute to thank Lauren Sapina, Kim Scott, and the entire Women's Leadership Forum staff who worked tirelessly to make this event a success. Thank you. In 1992, 30 women formed the Women's Leaders for Clinton Gore in Massachusetts. That group became the model for what is now the Women's Leadership Forum, a nationwide political battalion of Democratic women determined to re-elect Bill Clinton. Hillary Clinton is the inspiration for the Women's Leadership Forum, and it takes a pretty big village to raise a forum. Thank you all for being here today to welcome the First Lady, and it is now my pleasure to introduce the chair of the state party, Joan Menard.
Thank you very much. It's my honor to welcome all of you here today and to thank some of those folks and people here and some who were unable to be here who have made this such a wonderful success. Let me begin by thanking, number one, Hillary Clinton, of course, and number 2 and 3, Senator Ted Kennedy and Senator John Kerry, who were really instrumental, and also the 2 ladies that are here on the stage, 3 ladies that are here on the stage, Mrs. Menino, Ms. Heinz, and Mrs. Kennedy. I'm just going to acknowledge those folks who have been so helpful, and please hold your applause. There's a lot of them. Mayor Tom Menino, Congressman Joe Kennedy, Congressman Joe Moakley, Attorney General Scott Harshbarger, John Tierney, candidate for U.S. Congress, Jim McGovern, candidate for U.S. Congress, Senator Terry Murray, Senator Lois Pines, Senator Marion Walsh, and many state representatives, Representative Jerry Creedon, Carol Donovan, Representative Gloria Fox, Representative Barbara Gardner, Representative Barbara Gray, Rachel Caprillion, Representative Sally Kearns, Representative Kay Kahn, Representative Janet O'Brien, Ann Paulson, Representative Pam Rezor, Representative Mary Jane Simmons, and Representative Stephen Tolman. Our 2 Governor's Council women, Cynthia Stone Cream, and Governor's Council Dorothy Kelly Gay. And last but not least, 3 people who are serving in the Clinton administration, Elaine Guiney, who was the coordinated campaign chair and did such a wonderful job helping elect Bill Clinton in 1992. Mary Lou Crane, who is with the Small Business Administration, and Jan Pascal with the U.S. Department of Education. The other two people who are here on the stage with us, Don Fowler and the Massachusetts Women's Leadership Forum Chair, Shannon O'Brien, who may be a candidate for something. And my friend, the Regional Chair, Democratic National Committee woman, Marty X. Ferris. And there he is, the thorn between all the roses. I am really pleased and happy that this gentleman just arrived. He has been my inspiration, my mentor, our leader. He is the chair of the Democratic National Committee and has been all over the United States. He's in Massachusetts a great deal, so I assume he's in all the other states. We love to have him here. The chair of the Democratic National Committee, Don Fowler. Just in time.
Well, I do enjoy coming to Massachusetts, but I almost didn't make it today, but I am happy to be here. 19 weeks and 5 days from today is Election Day. 1996, we're going to the polls and re-elect John Kerry, Senator from Massachusetts. And re-electing John Kerry, Senator from Massachusetts, will help us regain control of the United States Senate. And when we do that, there will be certain results that will come from Democrats having recaptured control of the United States Senate. For one, Jesse Helms will not be chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Strom Thurmond will not be chair of the Senate Armed Services Committee. And Alphonse D'Amato will not be chair of the Senate Banking Committee. And while we're electing John Kerry to the Senate here in Massachusetts, we're also going to give our electoral votes to Bill Clinton and Al Gore for president and vice president. To my good friend Carol Pinsky, who is the national chair of the Women's Leadership Forum, to Joan Menard, who is one of the absolute best state chairs in the entire United States Senate, the chair here in Massachusetts, to Shannon O'Brien and Mrs. Kennedy and Mrs. Heinz and Mrs. Menino and Elaine Schuster. I want to say hello and thank you for being here, and thank you for your great and good leadership for the Democratic Party. The Women's Leadership Forum is the most dynamic, vital, creative force in the Democratic Party today. Your presence here lends evidence to that. Tipper Gore is the honorary chair of the WLF, and under her leadership and under the leadership of the First Lady, we have had 5 of these mass forums throughout the United States. And I want to tell you that there is a level of energy and vitality and interest and commitment to the re-election of Bill Clinton among the women of the United States that's unsurpassed, and it will be with your leadership and your support and your votes that Bill Clinton will be re-elected President of the United States in November. It is a wonderful time to be a Democrat. The polls are up. The spirit in America is up. The vision for the future is up. And our spirits are up because we do stand at the threshold of a new century, and it will be the greatest century in the history of America. You know, there's a statue outside of the one of the buildings in Washington, and it says, "What's past is prologue." And I asked a cab driver one day what that meant. And he said, "What's past is prologue." Well, that means you ain't seen nothing yet. And that's what America looks at in the 21st century with Bill Clinton in the White House, leading us and showing us the way in health care and education, the environment, welfare reform, tax policies, and a whole set of other issues. If Bill Clinton is reelected, and he will be, frankly, it will be with an overwhelming majority of the votes of the women of America. In the Senate race in Oregon last January, the Democratic candidate won by less than 1%. Women constituted 52% of the total vote in that election, and women gave Ron Wyden, the Democratic candidate, 57% of their vote in Oregon. I think we're looking at a general election for president and for the Senate here in Massachusetts and all across the country where the same kinds of results will be necessary. And it is under the leadership of Carol Pinsky and you and other women all across America that we will prepare this country, not just for the next 4 years, but for the next 4 decades. That's the destiny of the Democratic Party, and it is the destiny of America to lead this world into the 21st century. I met a lady in the last 3 months, Teresa Heinz by name, about whom I had heard many good and fine things. In meeting her, I found out that she has a vital interest in the environment, a vital interest in education, a vital interest in the youth of America, and a vital interest in America's leading role in international relations. And after reading about her and what she's done and getting to know her a little bit, I found out that she and her husband share those same values and those same interests with President and Mrs. Clinton. It gives me a great deal of pleasure to introduce to you someone who exemplifies the same values and commitments to the same issues that we all have and that are personified in our First Lady and in our President. It gives me a great deal of pleasure to introduce to you, present to you, Teresa Heinz. Teresa.
Thank you very much, Don. Ladies, mostly ladies, and some gentlemen, good afternoon. I want to thank you all for coming, and this is a wonderful gathering which we've looked forward to. I had occasion to speak with a group of women professionals here in Boston about the gender gap, and we discussed how women don't buy the simplistic snake oil of that Newt Gingrich and his merry band of throwbacks, and what they're trying to peddle us. Women care about the budget, and we care about the economy, and about a balanced budget and about trade. But we also care about children, about education and the environment. And we care about health, and we care about security. And we care about human rights and civil rights and equality of opportunity. And we care about the quality of life. And when someone comes along and offers us a contract that ignores all of these things, we know it's a raw deal. We know it's a raw deal for women, a raw deal for children, a raw deal for Massachusetts, and a raw deal for our country. Women have never had a greater stake in the direction of politics than we do this year. In the battle for the White House, in the battle for the Senate, here in Massachusetts, and in countless races around the country, we have the opportunity to demand a return to the politics of reason. And we can make that demand known by supporting candidates who respect us, by respecting the things we value. We are privileged to have with us here today a woman who has helped lead the fight, a woman who I am pleased to call my friend. And with great courage and enormous dignity, Hillary Rodham Clinton has become our nation's most forceful advocate for a fair and just society. Like all pioneers, she has paid a price for daring new ground as a First Lady. But the women of America are proud of her, and certainly her strength and her resolve have inspired me as I have reacquainted myself with the peculiar role of candidate's wife. Now it is my pleasure to introduce another woman who has been a friend and a source of inspiration, Vicky Reggie Kennedy. Everywhere I go in Massachusetts, the people I meet, men and women, tell me about Vicky. They talk about her intelligence, her warmth, her sense of humor, and about how genuine she is. They know her, they respect her, and most of all, they like her. This is no surprise for those of us who know her. Vicky's husband is one of America's great senators, and he has been the best of friends to women. But in '94, Ted's secret weapon was Vicky. She worked closely with the women's community to get out the vote and to focus attention on women's issues. On election day, a phenomenal 2/3 of Massachusetts women voted for Ted and Vicky Kennedy. But Vicky is not just a candidate's wife. She's a respected professional, a lawyer who has been enormously generous with her talents and her time on a range of social issues, including women's health and the prevention of domestic violence, gun control, children's health, and education and AIDS. To each one of these issues, she has been utterly committed and involved. As a political spouse involved in the campaign, I think Vicky set a new standard, and it's a high one. And I will tell you that it's not easy to follow in Vicky's footsteps. But what's remarkable about her and so indicative of her character is how generous she has been in trying to help me. When I first came to Massachusetts, I didn't know that many people. Without being asked, Vicky offered to help. She made me feel welcome, and she's helped me to meet new friends. You don't find many people like that in life, let alone in politics. I would also like to congratulate someone who I know is here today, and I'm proud to call a new friend, Dorothy Stoneman, for her wonderful MacArthur Prize. A great woman of Massachusetts. Anyway, I added that on because I knew she was here, Vicky. She is a wonderful, wonderful person. I'm proud to call a friend too. But Vicky, to you, we are all proud. I am proud. And I know that even in a town like Washington, where politics rules, all the women in the Senate, meaning all the spouses, love Vicky. I am proud to welcome you, Vicky. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you. Thank you so much. Teresa Heinz is a remarkable woman. And I'll clap for that. And a powerful, if very soft-spoken voice for so many causes that we share, from protecting the environment, to promoting education reform, to supporting the arts. We are fortunate to have her now as an advocate for the people and principles of Massachusetts. She is a leader, a colleague, and most of all, a friend. And I'm honored to welcome all of you here this afternoon. What better way to celebrate the continuing success of the Women's Leadership Forum and the beginning of Network 96 as a voice and force within the Democratic Party. We are very proud of what the Leadership Forum has achieved, creating new opportunities for women to become active in the Democratic Party at the national level, developing and strengthening unique nationwide ties that make more of a difference with each passing year. The Democratic Party has gained insight, life, and spirit from the innovative ideas, the energy, the ability, and the resources of the extraordinary number of women who have participated so completely and led so effectively in so many of the forum's activities. We're proud of what we've accomplished, and we're proud to be here today to launch an impressive new organization, Network 96, to enable women across the nation to join in 3 essential tasks. First, we are committed to re-electing President Bill Clinton and Vice President Al Gore. Second, we are committed to regaining Democratic control of the Senate and the House of Representatives. And third, we are committed to electing Democratic candidates in state and local races throughout Massachusetts and across this country. Ted and I know, as Teresa mentioned, the indispensable role that women and women's issues played in his own re-election campaign here in Massachusetts in 1994, and we are more grateful than we can ever say for all your help and hard work. Without it, Ted might not have won. And with it, with an active and an engaged women's vote, Democratic candidates and causes cannot and will not lose this year. Thank you. Women made the difference in 1994 in Massachusetts, and we can do it in 1996 for John Kerry, and across the nation for Bill Clinton, Al Gore, and the entire Democratic ticket. Judging from the turnout here today, we're off to an amazing start. I'm delighted that so many of you could join us, and I'm especially grateful for the presence of our guest of honor. There is no woman I admire more than Hillary Rodham Clinton. She is an outstanding leader, wife, and mother. She is a caring friend and a guiding star in improving the lives of women, children, and families in America and across the world. She first became well known for her pioneering work with the Children's Defense Fund and the Legal Services Corporation. As First Lady of Arkansas, she chaired an education committee that transformed public schools. She introduced a landmark program to help parents teach their children to read and prepare them for preschool. She founded the Arkansas Advocates for Children and Families. And as First Lady of the United States, she fought long and hard for fundamental health reform. And when others look back, many years from now, I am convinced that history will honor her work as an indispensable contribution to the final victory on this issue that can and will be won. In the past year, she spoke eloquently at the United Nations and at the World Conference on Women in Beijing. She leaves for Eastern Europe at the beginning of July, carrying with her the message of women's equality and children's rights. She is America's ambassador of hope and help for women and children everywhere. Her book has been on the bestseller list for many months. Her weekly newspaper column has won her millions of readers and admirers. And let me also say this, we're all the prouder of her in this difficult campaign season because of the dignity, aplomb, and grace with which she handles so many unfair partisan attacks. And nowhere is her character more evident than in her relationship with her daughter, Chelsea. Chelsea is a remarkable young woman in her own right, and the best tribute of all to her parents' love and example. For all these reasons, and many more, we're honored to have Mrs. Clinton here today. It's a privilege to introduce her now, a role model for millions of women in our own country and around the world, a great friend and a great First Lady, the First Lady of the United States, Hillary Rodham Clinton.
Hello. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. I am just thrilled to be back in Boston and to have a chance to see so many of you who are both longtime friends of mine and my husband's and people whom I am delighted to be getting to know. I want to thank Vicky for that introduction. And more than that, I want to thank her for her friendship and her support and the fun I always have with her. I don't know how many of you have been lucky enough to spend time with Vicky, but you always laugh. I mean, it is one of the great joys of my time in Washington. I am so pleased to be here with another friend of mine. Teresa Heinz is a woman of great integrity and commitment, and Massachusetts is not only very lucky to have John Kerry as your senator now and into the future, but to have the talents of Teresa Heinz as well. I also am pleased to share this platform with Elaine Schuster, who worked so hard on this event, Joan Menard, who is doing a marvelous job here in the State Democratic Party, Don Fowler, who has traveled and worked tirelessly on behalf of the National Democratic Party, Angela Menino, whom I'm always pleased to be with. She and her husband have just given great leadership to this wonderful city. Shannon O'Brien, and Carol Pensky, who is the national chair of the Women's Leadership Forum. To all of you who had anything to do with pulling this event together and creating this extraordinary turnout, I want to thank you for your contributions, but more than that, for the leadership and example that you are setting as to what women can do in politics and the opportunities available for all of us. The Women's Leadership Forum and Network 96 have made it possible for thousands and thousands of women around the country to be involved. I have attended events like this in Miami and in Washington and in Philadelphia and in New York. On Monday, I'll be in Seattle, and then a few weeks later in Los Angeles and San Francisco. It is spreading like wildfire from one end of the country to the next. Women who want to be involved in the political decision-making of our country. And the reason I believe you're here is the reason I am here. We have a clear vision about what we want our country to be, and we know we have to fight for that vision. We cannot leave it to others. We must be among those who stand up and say, here is what we want for America in the 21st century. Women have always played a critical role in the life of our country. We may not have always been in elected office, as many of you in this room are. We certainly may not have been among those who helped to fund political campaigns in the past, but we've been there on the front lines year in and year out as volunteers and participants working on behalf of causes and candidates in whom we believed. And at every critical point in American history, women have been catalysts for change. I think often about the last 100 years as we are about to end this century, and at so many points, women were there to help set the direction that this nation would take. Think for a minute about the similarities that exist between our time and the so-called progressive era of 100 years ago. We were in the midst of great change in our country. We were moving from an agricultural society to an industrial one. People were leaving farms and rural areas to move to cities. Immigrants were flooding into places like Boston. There was so much change, and much of it seemed to create problems for people as they attempted to make sense of what was happening in their lives. We also saw, though, women coming to the forefront to say that we had to provide for each other, that it wasn't enough just to succeed on one's own, but we had to lend a helping hand. Women like Jane Addams in the settlement houses of Chicago, or Eleanor Roosevelt in the tenements of New York City, and so many others like them, who appreciated that when change was occurring at a rapid rate, we needed to do more than just stand by and watch it happen. We had to meet the challenges of our time, and we had to protect the values that we cherished. We had to provide both for opportunity and responsibility as we worked to create stronger communities and families. Jane Addams once compared government and politics to what she called enlarged housekeeping. She thought women could help make government run more effectively if they were involved in the political process. She, like many other women of the time, understood that new times demanded new responses from all of us. The first demonstration ever held at the White House was when the suffragettes chained themselves to the White House fence. Even the president didn't like that very much. He looked outside the window and could not understand what all the fuss was about. But we know, because we owe those women and others like them the right to vote and their willingness to take risks on behalf of opportunities for the rest of us. At this time, we are faced with new challenges, and once again, men and women are called to meet them. We have a rich legacy of commitment and action. 75 years after the vote, however, many women do not feel they have a stake in our political process. 54 million women chose not to vote in the 1994 elections. Part of what the Women's Leadership Forum and Network 96 is about is bringing to all women, wherever they live or work, the message that it does matter. The political process affects our lives in ways we may not even be aware of, and that it is critical that the people who are elected to office understand what is at stake as we draw to the end of this century. Oftentimes in election years, people will stand before audiences like this and say, This is one of the most important elections we face. I'm going to do that because I believe that with all my heart. This election is about two very distinct visions of the future. It is about who we are and who we want to become as a people and as a nation. It is about what legacy we will leave our children and grandchildren. And it is about whether we will choose to live in a society divided by income and race and religion, or one that works to live up to our time-honored principles of inclusion and compassion, and to build a better community for all Americans. In the face of all the changes that are occurring around us, I think we should just look at the challenges we face, because they are not just challenges for elected officials, not just for the president or for Senator Kennedy or Senator Kerry or your state representatives. They are challenges for all of us. And this election will determine in large measure whether we face up to our challenges or walk away from them. And if we do face up to them, whether we do so with our values in mind as to the kind of nation we want to build. The first challenge, which the President referred to in talking about what we faced as a nation in the State of the Union, is to cherish our children and strengthen our families. There is nothing more important than how we care for each other and how we raise our children. And you know, talking about family values is not enough. We have to act in ways that value families, and by November, based not on talk, but on action, I believe Americans will know that it is the Democratic Party that is the true pro-family party in our country. Just look at the record. It took this president, a Democratic president, to sign into law the Family and Medical Leave Act. Over 800,000 Massachusetts workers are protected by the Family and Medical Leave Act, and a recent bipartisan congressional study found that it was not a burden on business, but that it gave workers the flexibility to be both good workers and good parents. The Family and Medical Leave Act is what family values should be about. It also took this president to try to take action to return authority to parents so that they could have more say over what happened in their own homes. That's what the idea behind the V-chip is, that we know that things come into our living rooms across our television sets that we don't think are good for children. But often parents feel overwhelmed and bewildered about how to take back authority. Well, there are several things that need to be done. The V-chip, which the president championed, will give parents the technical authority to be able to program their TV sets. The voluntary rating system, which the industry agreed to at a meeting with the president, will enable you and me to understand how to program that set by making decisions about what we want our children to watch. And right now, the Federal Communications Commission is considering a proposal strongly backed by the president to require networks to offer 3 hours of quality programming for our children. It is the least that should be done to provide better television in our homes. We also have a president who has been willing to stand up to the tobacco lobby and say, quit advertising tobacco products to children. Now, we all know that parents bear the primary responsibility for children, but as a mother, I know that I do not do it all by myself or with my husband. There are many people out in society who will affect my daughter, whether I like it or not. And to have a president who understands how challenging it is today to raise children gives me a lot of comfort, because he understands that government should be a partner in trying to make society more family-friendly. The other important challenge we face is to make sure that educational opportunity is available throughout our lifetimes. Now, again, that is not the government's responsibility completely, is it? We all have a role to play. That's why it's a challenge that goes to each of us and not just to the president or to the Congress. If I could wave a magic wand, I would ask that every mother and father in Massachusetts talk to their babies and read to their babies and turn off the television set and spend time with their children, because I know that will help prepare children for school. But I also know that some children won't have that kind of experience, which is why I'm so proud my husband supported the expansion of Head Start so that more children could have that kind of opportunity. And I also appreciate how important it is to support public education. Yes, to reform it, but to stand firmly behind public schools. That's what the President's educational reform agenda has been about. Goals 2000, setting goals so that schools and teachers and parents know what we're trying to achieve. It is also critical that we make sure no young person willing to study hard is kept from going to college for financial reasons. You know, one of the first things the president did was to make direct student loans more available to young people, to cut the interest rates by cutting out the middlemen in handling of those loans. He also believes that Pell Grants are an important part of providing the financing for young people, and that work-study is something that needs to be expanded so that young people willing to work will have that option. And just a few weeks ago, he introduced what he calls America's Hope Scholarships, a fully paid-for scholarship program that would give a $1,500 scholarship for the first year of college. That would pay for the vast majority of community colleges anywhere in this country. And then if the student, and it doesn't have to be a young person, it can be a person who has been dislocated or downsized out of a job, if that person does a good job that first year, stays out of trouble, and gets a B average, that person would be eligible for a second $1,500 scholarship. Now, since my husband made that announcement, I have sat and talked with community college students in Florida and Illinois. And what I've heard has been encouraging, because these young people primarily have not been able before to afford to go to college, or they've had to work so many hours that even their attempt to get an associate degree would take many years. This investment in their future is not only good for them, it is good for America. This is no time to turn back on our commitment to make college affordable for every person willing to go and work hard. The third challenge is to make sure the American dream stays within reach for every American. Economic security is important for all of us. And the president understood that when he pushed hard for the economic growth and deficit reduction package in 1993. Some of you may remember that the president's package, which he said would both cut the deficit by half, would create jobs, and would move the economy forward, did not receive one single Republican vote. Go back and read what they were saying at that time. It sounded like a convention of Chicken Littles. The sky was going to fall if the president's plan was passed. Well, now we've had 3 years to see the results. The deficit has been cut by more than half. 9.7 million new jobs have been created in the United States. And very importantly, we have the lowest combined rate of inflation and unemployment that we have had in more than 20 years. The good news is that the American economy is growing and putting people to work. Also in that plan, the president removed income tax liability from those workers who were working hard 40 hours a week with children in the home but could not get above poverty, something called the Earned Income Tax Credit. Almost 200,000 Massachusetts families have received a tax cut because of the Earned Income Tax Credit. The unemployment rate in Massachusetts has dropped from 7.5% to 4.9%. We have moved in the right direction, but there is still work to be done. We know that. We have to make sure that the jobs that are created are good paying jobs and that everyone has an incentive to work. And although much of the responsibility for that lies in the private sector, which has to begin to share its productivity and profitability with its workers in order for the entire economy to prosper, there are steps that the Congress can take, and it should start by passing an increase in the minimum wage for all minimum wage level workers. The Congress should also finally understand that economic security and health security go hand in hand, and pass and send to the president in a form he can sign the Kennedy-Kassebaum bill. We could help so many millions of people by making insurance portable and by guaranteeing issuance to those who have some pre-existing condition. And we also must do everything we can to protect Medicare and Medicaid. That is a lifeline for many, many families. You know, people sometimes think of Medicare as just a program for older Americans and Medicaid as just a program for the very poorest of Americans. I believe that the debate over the last months has helped many to understand that these programs are really important to all Americans. If you have an older relative on Medicare, you know that your mother or father or aunt or uncle or grandparent will get the health care that he or she needs, and that you can continue to try to save to send your child to college, to make your mortgage and your car payments to try to get a little bit ahead. Medicaid is the single largest payer of nursing home bills in America. And some people ask me, how could that be? And I give them just one statistic, that if you know women over the age of 65, I want you to just think of all those faces of all those women we all know. And I want you to remember that the median income for American women over the age of 65 is less than $9,000. That is what our women in this country are living on. Medicaid helps pay for the co-pays and the deductibles on many Medicare policies for the poorest of our older citizens, and helps relieve the financial burdens that would otherwise be carried by their families. So economic security and health security is a challenge that we are meeting, but we have to continue to work toward. The fourth challenge is to reclaim our neighborhoods from crime and gangs and drugs and violence. And here, too, we have made progress because we finally had a president who understood that just talking tough about crime wasn't going to scare anybody at all. You know, during the 1980s, I used to listen to all of the people in national politics on the other side just talk tougher and tougher and tougher about crime while I watched the crime rate grow and grow and grow. And I was so proud that when my husband tackled the crime problem with the crime bill that he pushed through the Congress, again with very little help from the other side, he understood that talking tough was not the answer. Instead, he called for 100,000 new police officers because he understood that if we could put more police on the streets, we could prevent crime and catch criminals. Already here in Massachusetts, almost 1,500 new police officers are patrolling the streets because of the crime bill. And we have results to show for it. The crime rate is dropping across the country. Here in Boston, the number of reported robberies fell 15% in 1995. We're beginning to see some positive direction of crime taking us out of the fear business and beginning to make us feel safer. Do we have a long way to go? Of course we do. But because we had a president with a plan, we have seen results. We've also seen the results of a president who would sign the Brady bill. And because of the Brady bill, 60,000 felons have been prevented from buying guns when they had no business having access to weapons like that. We've also seen the results of the ban on certain assault-style weapons, military weapons that have no business in the hands of teenagers and drug runners in our neighborhood. Now, I'm not going to tell you that it's easy to stand up to the intense pressure that comes to bear in Washington when you go after a special interest, but I'm glad that we have a president who stood up to the National Rifle Association on behalf of the people of America. Now, even though we've seen the crime rate dropping overall, we have to do more when it comes to juvenile crime, and the president has called for a concerted effort that joins federal and state and local law enforcement to go after gangs and go after the youthful predators. But at the same time, anyone who's ever worked in any neighborhood in America knows that we've got to give young people something to say yes to. We need recreational programs. We need to give them some basis for hope for their own future. The fifth challenge is to protect our environment. Now, that was always a bipartisan issue. Teresa and I were talking about that earlier. The environment is neither Republican or Democrat. All of us want to be able to breathe our air and drink our water and eat our food. But unfortunately, in the last year, we have seen a Congress that has permitted lobbyists for polluters to write loopholes into our environmental laws. We must be vigilant and stand up for the environment. And there isn't any real choice. If you care about the environment, you have to vote for Clinton and Gore in November in order to be sure it is protected. The sixth challenge we face is how the United States will meet its responsibilities as a world leader. If we expect to compete economically, if we want our ideals of democracy and the free market to flourish, we must remain engaged in the world. The United States cannot turn its back on its responsibilities and become isolated. We have a lot of work to do with other countries to fight nuclear proliferation or to try to take a stand against gangs and drug cartels that respect no national boundary. There is a lot that the rest of the world looks to us, and this president understands that. He knows that it is in our long-term interests to stand up for peace, to take our place with those who are attempting to move from communism and totalitarianism to democracy. And so long as this president is in the Oval Office, the United States will remain an engaged leader of the world, not an isolationist country attempting to withdraw from its responsibilities. And finally, we face a challenge here at home to reform our own political system. We still need campaign finance reform. We have to be sure that every person understands the stakes to participate and to vote in our political system. And particularly this year, we have to persuade every American that politics is their business. You know, sometimes I'm asked how I can stand politics. And I know that the question really refers to electoral politics and the atmosphere that affects our political life today. But I always ask the questioner, are you married? Do you belong to any club or a church? Do you participate in decisions at work? Because politics is not just about who's elected to office. Politics with a small p is how we make decisions together, how we reach consensus and compromise. Every one of us has a stake in politics, and in an election year, we have a stake in electoral politics. There is so much that we have to be grateful for in this nation, and some of it we take for granted. We take for granted our rights and our privileges, our freedom. And because I have traveled on your behalf to other countries, I no longer am able to do that. I have been in places where people are struggling to find democracy for themselves and claim it, where their relatives and friends have been imprisoned and even killed because they stood for what we believe in. And I saw most clearly what happens when people turn against one another instead of working with each other for political ends when my daughter and I recently visited Bosnia. I wish every one of you could have taken that trip with me. I met first with men and women who had survived the last 5 years, doctors and nurses who had kept clinics open under bombardment, teachers who had tried to round up students to continue teaching despite conditions. I heard from women who have not seen their husbands since they were dragged away one day from their homes. And I heard the pain in their voices, and I saw it in their eyes as they wondered how all of that had happened to them. Several told me about how they had gotten along with their neighbors. They used to attend social events together, Muslims and Croats and Serbs, and then all of a sudden that stopped. And people they once considered friends would no longer look at them and even would come with strangers to drive them from their homes. And I remember reading the account of an interview with a number of women in one of the towns that had been ethnically cleansed.